Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with a midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so and if you believe that this industry is going to be a big one in the future. And so with that, we're going to start with this news from Tom Engel as he highlights, wow, the White House drug czar acknowledged that cannabis can be efficacious in treating chronic pain and that current cannabis laws have not worked. And so that is quite a remarkable statement coming from someone in that position, and it's remarkable because at this point in time he's actually speaking the truth. And so does this mean much? We'll have to wait and see what this is setting up for, but obviously rather hear this than not. And with that, onto this news from Tom Engel is apparently in Washington, the DC Council approved a bill to let people self-certify as medical cannabis patients without a doctor's recommendation. And so obviously we can see how people can try to take advantage or possibly abuse this, but this is how they've effectively figured out a way to circumvent Congress's rider blocking the legalization of recreational cannabis sales. Well, this sounds like a victory, and I imagine it's going to make it easier for anyone in DC that needs access to cannabis for medical reasons in order to get that. All this really does, in my eyes, is legitimize the black market without actually creating an adult use market that would provide legal jobs and tax revenue through a legitimate framework, something that those in DC voted for in 2014 and the lawmakers still haven't been able to get them. So just wanted to show you a bit more detail from this article, as the Washington DC Council unanimously approved emergency legislation on Tuesday that will effectively create a recreational cannabis market. I don't think this is how you create a recreational market, by allowing people to self-certify themselves as medical cannabis patients and access dispensaries without needing to get a recommendation from a doctor, yet the dispensaries are not legally run dispensaries, and so therefore it's trying to legitimize the black market instead of actually going through the regulatory hoops of creating a legal adult use market that will again provide all those benefits. And so that's what I get out of this. If you get something different, let me know. But basically just to highlight is, however, the issue was addressed in a resolution attached to the measure. It notes that there are lower barriers to access at gray market suppliers because an unregistered patient could simply buy a non-cannabis item in exchange gifted cannabis without going through the application and certification process to access licensed dispensaries. There are also safety risks in that market, the legislation noted, because products aren't subject to quality control standards as in the existing medical cannabis program. And so because these shops are operating outside the law, there is no requirement or enforcement of customer registration, including verification that purchases are of legal age, the resolution says. In addition, for gray market products, there is no assurance that the cannabis has been tested or adequately labeled, raising concerns that products could be contaminated or otherwise unsafe for consumers, and that the potency of cannabis purchase could differ from that which was advertised. So while this workaround legislation is definitely a step in the right direction, as those in DC who need access to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative will be able to get it, in reality though, I don't see how this bill does anything to actually combat the illicit market, therefore allowing it to thrive alongside the established medical market that does exist in DC, but unfortunately, again, with no effort to actually create a legitimate adult use market, the illicit market is going to be able to thrive alongside that. And so we'll see how that turns out in time, but with that, another story from Marijuana Moment. Congressional committee votes to protect state cannabis programs from federal interference. So while we reported on the failure last week as lawmakers had pushed Appropriations Committee leadership to include the cannabis language in the base fiscal year 2023 spending legislation for Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies, CSJ, as introduced, that didn't end up happening, much to their disappointment. And so supporters therefore launched a backup plan to pursue a rider as an amendment in committee, as Marijuana Moment first reported on Monday. And so jointly introduced by Reps Barbara Lee and Dave Joyce, co-chairs of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, the amendment passed on a voice vote. And so now the CJS bill includes provisions preventing the Justice Department from using federal funds from interfering in the implementation of any cannabis programs. And so while it does not specify whether it's medical or recreational, therefore we might assume that it can cover both. Is it possible this is the safe harbor language that would give investors the confidence to invest in cannabis companies without fear of federal prosecution? And is it possible this is how they're sneakily getting it in there? We don't know. We'll have to wait and see, but just wanted to share that perspective. As we scroll down, we can see the new language. Assuming that this language would be enough to protect all states with some form of legal cannabis, whether it's medical or recreational. And so with that, it is obviously nice to see that this has been added into that bill as an amendment, but still, just want to bring you down to the bottom line, because importantly, it remains to be seen whether the Senate will accept any of the House-led cannabis and drug policy proposals. And so while the House seems to have voted on this in a voice vote to get it done, still up to the Senate ultimately. And so Senate appropriators have not yet released their spending bill for full year 2023 and typically wait until after the House has acted, so it's not yet clear which issues will ultimately get reconciled between the two chambers and adopted into law. And so while this sounds like a small victory, it doesn't really mean anything yet, and I'll update you as we move forward into the future. But with that, I did want to share, so thanks Todd for sharing this, as GOP Congresswoman takes cannabis victory lap after primary win and talks next steps for her legalization bill. And so this is in reference to Nancy Mace. And so again, while her winning her primary doesn't mean a whole lot right now while the Dems are still in power, just wanted to share this as she is talking about cannabis legalization still, which we like to see. And she says, we're willing to play ball. We're willing to work with anyone who's willing to work with us on both sides of the aisle to push it forward. And it seems like she's being optimistic that she could get some sort of bipartisan effort from now until November to get this done. Very much unlikely, I would say, just based on how the Dems have acted over the last 15 months. But nonetheless, good to see the Republicans at least open to some sort of a bipartisan effort with the States Reform Act that they have now. And so on to some states news. This one comes from the Green Entrepreneur, as cannabis sales in the Midwest are lighting up. And so while I do try to cover Illinois and Michigan when they publish their sales figures, and we should get Illinois' June figures at some point early in July, just wanted to share this as the Midwest is becoming a larger player in the legal cannabis marketplace as more states begin to legalize recreational use. And two of the most populated states, Michigan and Illinois, have legal markets that are skyrocketing. As BDSA retail sales tracking data shows that total 2021 sales in Illinois were around 70% higher than in 2020, despite Illinois having the same amount of dispensaries, just 110 in 2021 as they did in 2020, while legal sales in Michigan totaled around $1.8 billion in 2021, roughly double the estimated legal sales in 2020. But the reason why Michigan saw so much more growth than in Illinois is because it is an unlimited license market where you can open as many dispensaries as you want. But the good news is that in Illinois, the extra 185 licenses that were awarded last summer but put on hold because of court cases, those court cases and the hold has now been lifted. Therefore, we could anticipate these new dispensaries being awarded and put online hopefully by early 2023, which will increase the number of dispensaries in Illinois from 110 to 295, which will obviously help drive more sales. And so with that, not going to go through the whole article, but you can grab the link below if you're interested. But just to highlight, Illinois, Michigan, and Missouri are poised to be 3 of the top 10 contributors to U.S. cannabis sales growth by 2026. So don't stop now. So on to this one. For more state news, Todd Harrison shares Maine's cannabis industry booming, no thanks to banks, as owners must use cash and other workarounds as a reluctant financial industry worries about federal retribution. So I'm not going to go into this article, but just highlighting that Maine's industry is booming despite not having the Safe Banking Act. And so I'll put this link below if you're interested in learning about Maine's market. But then we've also got this one from New Cannabis Ventures, as Rhode Island adult use cannabis sales will start by year end. And so Rhode Island became the 19th state to legalize adult use cannabis last month when Governor Dan McKee put pen to paper and signed the Rhode Island Cannabis Act into law. And so the new law allows for 24 new retail licenses to be issued in 6 geographic areas of the Ocean State, and sales are expected to start as early as December 2022. So it is positive to see that, to see the fact that Rhode Island might consider starting as early as the end of this year. And so some highlights of the legislation include, so you can pause to read if you want to learn more about the Rhode Island market and how they plan to get ready to kick off before the end of 2022. And with that, some more state news is Nevada approves cannabis lounge regulations, opening door to public cannabis use. This comes from the Nevada Independent. So happy to finally report that a year after lawmakers passed a bill authorizing cannabis consumption lounges, Nevada officials have approved regulations that pave the way for bar-like establishments where people could use cannabis as early as this year. And so the Cannabis Compliance Board met Tuesday and approved regulations governing lounges with just minor verbiage changes, even after significant public comments suggested more sweeping edits. So that is good news to consider that these could be online and introduced in Nevada as early as the end of 2022. So good job, Nevada, highlighting that states that have reformed their cannabis laws already are evolving with the times and leading the charge towards common sense legislation that we should have adopted a long time ago. And with that, last bit of states news from Jack Invest, as apparently for the 56 licenses in Connecticut, there were 37,293 applicants, highlighting the demand to join the cannabis industry and get in, despite the do-nothing Dems delaying SAFE and not keeping their campaign promises, is very real. And so this industry is not going anywhere. And so with that, out of some MSO news, Verano announces the opening of Move Winter Haven, the company's 48th Florida location, as Move Winter Haven is located at this address, a busy thoroughfare with an average daily traffic count of 28,000 vehicles. The dispensary is based in Polk County, the fastest growing county by population in Florida, with a population of 753,000, while Verano's active operations span 13 states comprised of 101 dispensaries and 13 cultivation and processing facilities with more than 1 million square feet of cultivation capacity. So good to see Verano continuing to expand, especially in Florida, one of those very competitive states. Well, we've got this one from Seeking Alpha, basically a write-up on Green Thumb Industries. And so if you're interested in learning more about Green Thumb Industries as a possible asset to invest in, or just want to learn more about the company, feel free to grab the whole link below, as I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but a quick summary highlights that Green Thumb is the undisputed cash flow champion in cannabis thus far. So you could argue that before the acquisition of Harvest, that was Trulieve, but I digress. As summary, investors must look beyond stock prices to evaluate the quality of cannabis companies. Cash flow is currently the single biggest indicator of financial health in cannabis, and Green Thumb is the cash flow king since Trulieve has bought another company and ceased to produce positive cash flow for I think at least one quarter, but I imagine they're going to be back in action soon. But nonetheless, if you wanted to read more about them, feel free to grab the link below. Well, we got this one from Justin and a bunch of numbers, so thank you, Justin, for highlighting this one as Air Wellness continues to expand into markets where they were previously underserving. As we know, New Jersey has just launched, and that's going to be a big driver of sales for MSOs in that state, and Air Wellness just got a cultivation license approved, plus 3 of their medical dispensaries are now approved to sell adult use, and so that will help bottom line sales. Also good to see them continuing to expand in other eastern markets that will promise a lot of growth in the future, as NBC Boston shares. So also nice to see from NBC, although it is a local article, that this week the first cannabis dispensary in Boston's Back Bay will open its doors. So not going to go through the whole article, but if you're interested in learning about how Air Wellness is expanding and their operation in Boston, you can grab the link below to check it out. So now on to investment firms. So thank you, Todd Harrison, for sharing this, but keep in mind these investment firms have been wrong for a very long time. So just use it as information that you can take in to compare with what you already know and that you can potentially use to make better investment decisions, but do not take them at face value or as true. And so with that, Roth on U.S. cannabis, just to highlight, we believe different incremental cannabis bills targeting banking and social justice, including the recent Climb bill, will come together to form the SAFE Plus by the end. And while I'm still optimistic that this will be the case, and I back that up by having invested all of my money already by last fall, and hey, joke's on me, I obviously could have gotten much cheaper prices if I had more patience, but hey, you live and you learn. The reality is I'm also planning for the worst case scenario in case this does not pan out. And so while I have a lot of money invested already, I'm saving up some cash, and I'm really just going to wait with that cash until there's a clear sign that the trend has changed and we're heading up. But with that, just wanted to share what Roth has to say. So cannabis legislative update, SAFE out of competes, year-end possibility of SAFE Plus. So just to highlight potential upcoming federal legislation catalysts for U.S. cannabis, we've got safe banking, we've got Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act, we've got the capital lending and investment for cannabis businesses, known as the Climb Act, and then SAFE Plus Omnibus Bill. And so obviously there are a lot of paths forward, but with that, this one from Leafly reintroduces you to the Climb Act if you happen to miss Sunday's video, a new bipartisan cannabis banking bill, which would give MSOs the outright ability to uplist on major U.S. exchanges like the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. And so while we thought the Safe Banking Act could allow that in some of its forms, this is sort of the ingredient that we've been missing that would allow for that outright uplisting. And so this would be the best possible addition to a sort of Safe Plus by the end of the year, obviously. So hopefully that's why it was introduced in the first place. So again, not going to go through this whole article. You can pause to read there, or you can pause to read this snippet of what's in the Climb Act. It's basically the best version of the Safe Banking Act that we could have hoped for, plus the outright language that would allow for legislation. And so it is nice to see this, but again, still speculation as to what's going to happen with it. But with that, on to the next one. So Denis Rudev shares this one. U.S. cannabis markets keep growing despite all the pressure. And so this one comes from 8 Capital, and apparently with some news from state regulators, but they expect nearly $10 billion of total addressable market to be unlocked over the next 12 months, likely coming from Illinois opening new stores, New Jersey launching, and New York launching, based on states that have already legalized adult use cannabis. This revenue opportunity represents 40% of total 2021 industry sales and a meaningful long-term growth tailwind for U.S. MSOs. We've got another visual from 8 Capital, so thank you, Denis Rudev, for sharing this one, as U.S. cannabis valuations at the levels we might probably not see again. And I know I've been saying that for a long time, but obviously the lower the valuations go, the truer that statement becomes, especially when you compare it to the growth that these companies are going to see based on the fundamentals, especially from existing markets like Illinois, like Michigan, that are driving the growth, plus new markets that just came online like Arizona and New Mexico, plus markets that are coming online like New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut in the coming months. And so lack of liquidity and uncertainty over legalization created another perfect entry point for value investors, especially those with a lot more patience and experience than I do. But nonetheless, just happy to highlight that current valuations right now collectively shows that large cap MSOs with their enterprise value divided by net 12 months EBITDA are collectively trading at current multiples of 6.8x, which is very low in terms of EBITDA valuations, especially when, in February 2021, they were collectively trading at a 23.6 EBITDA, yet they're now making, double the revenue with double the amount of stores out. And if we look at large cap MSOs, enterprise value divided by net 12-month sales, same thing. Collectively, they're trading at a current price to sales multiple of 2.2x, yet in February 2021, at their peak, they were collectively trading at a price to sales multiple of 8.4x, yet they were making probably half the revenue. And again, some of the companies had half of the locations before some of the mergers that we've just seen over the last 15 months. And so highlighting how cheap these MSOs are, yet the fundamentals have never been stronger. And so with that, a few more from investment firms, this one from Jeffries on US Cannabis. So thank you, Todd, for sharing this one. So I'm not going to go through it, but you can just pause to read. Safe focus turns to the lame duck in the near term, at least, with Safe being in the Competes Act, unfortunately. And so more on that if you wanted to read, but they do talk about the introduction of Climb and how that could play into Safe Plus from now until November. So with that, we've got Beacon on US Cannabis. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this one. As insider buying continues, the insider buying that began in mid-May continued last week with activity in these MSOs. And so while in most cases the purchases are small relative to the buyer's overall holdings, this is still the most aggressive and broad-based buying we've observed in many months. And the charts below, sadly not shared though, show the aggregate net buying since mid-May, with Trulieve, Jushi, and TerraSyn seeing the most significant activity on a net dollar basis. And so while we do not like to see the share prices bleeding for the last 15 months, and it requires a hell of a lot of patience and a strong stomach to get through this does give us confidence seeing that insiders are buying because they believe in the future the share prices will be the companies will be worth a lot more in the future than they are now, highlighting that the share prices are severely discounted and undervalued, hence why they're buying. And so lastly, just wanted to share this one from Roth on US Cannabis, talking about California being at an inflection point on easing regulations and improved access. And so I'm not going to go through this one as I've covered it in past videos, but you can pause to read for a bit more of a refresher on California. But this one does come from Graham Farrar, president of Glasshouse Brands, which is based in California. So Graham is on the ground sharing that the California cannabis tax bill is making good progress, and they're expecting a vote later this week to solidify the changes that they previously talked about. And so that will include the cultivation tax being removed as of July 1st. So from my understanding, in 2 days, all of the legal MSOs operating in California will no longer have to pay a cultivation tax, which will add profits to their bottom lines, which is a big win for all of the companies operating right now. While excise tax is fixed at 15% for 3 years, then evaluated up and down, but never higher than 19%, while apparently January 1st, 2023, excise will be collected by retailers and social equity gets additional tax benefits. And so this is the official link to the bill, and so I'll put that in the link below if you're interested in reading on it. But good to see progress that will help the industry in California go in the right direction, help combat the illicit market, as opposed to heading in the wrong direction, which they've been heading in since they've gotten no positive changes. Well, lastly, Tom Mango shares this one from the California State Fair, as they've unveiled the winners of its first ever state-sanctioned cannabis competition. So just to highlight this, what a precedent. California State Fair had a cannabis competition. It's the first ever, and so obviously this will help normalize the plant in California, but other states that have reformed their laws, awarding 60 trophies and medals to businesses whose products were judged based on lab testing for quality and cannabinoid profiles. So just happy to again see that cannabis is being normalized slowly but surely in different ways, and seeing the State Fair unveil winners and actually allow a competition based on cannabis cultivation and quality of product is saying a lot. Which brings us to the best and biggest joke of the week. So thank you, Gary Steele, for sharing this virtue signaling post from the parent co, as they say, we're proud to support and partner with Senator Cory Booker to help move the Safe Banking Act along with other critical federal reforms forward. Are you fucking kidding me? The irony when a year ago Booker said at a press conference that he will lay himself down and do everything in his power to block the Safe Banking Act, which since then has only hurt the small business owners and the minority entrepreneurs who voted for the Dems based on their campaign promises to allow them into the cannabis industry. You cannot make this shit up. From our CEO, Troy Datcher, a true pleasure meeting with Senator Cory Booker last week to discuss the Safe Banking Act, along with the challenges that minority entrepreneurs across the state country face accessing capital. They only face these challenges because of you, Booker, and because of you, Schumer, who are paid by Big Pharma to delay this far. And so I don't know what the change of heart is. Hopefully it again is to help setting the stage until November, but just have to share the comments. Cory Booker has consistently been blocking the Safe Banking Act and was the primary reason for removing it from the NDAA last year. Black guys blocking social equity while saying he wants social equity. Seems about right. What a freaking joke. And so obviously this is a huge joke for us in the know, but in the game of perception versus reality, that is politics, obviously this makes us optimistic that we could see a change of heart from these politicians and we could see a push for Safe Plus from now until the end of the year. Again, we don't know, but this was certainly interesting to come across. And so last few ones, as Curaleaf again shares, according to our study conducted by the Harris poll, 62% of Americans prefer to use cannabis rather than pharmaceuticals to treat a medical issue. And so you can listen to Dr. Stacey Woodcock discuss the findings on Bloomberg's Business Week podcast, but share this one again just to highlight the reality that Big Pharma is aware of this, and that is why they're doing everything in their power, like lobbying for Schumer and Booker, likely the Republicans as well, in order to delay any sort of cannabis cannabis legislation despite the state-led growth story chugging along. Because once the floodgates open, they know that cannabis companies are coming for their market share, so they're doing everything they can in their power now to prevent that from happening. But this can only go on for so long because cannabis speaks for itself. And so with that, wanted to share this one from New Cannabis Ventures, as according to Alan Brockstein, cannabis stocks are extremely oversold. So I'm not going to go through this whole article, but you can grab the link below in the description if you're interested in learning about Alan's arguments as to why now might be a good time to starting a position. And so just for some context, he's been at this and running this site and his newsletter since October 2015. So he's been through the cycles and he's got a lot of perspective worth considering if you're interested in opening a position. And so lastly with that, just to highlight where we're at today, thank you Higher Ground for sharing this one, as in the last 2 decades, 15.7 million people have been arrested for non-violent cannabis offenses and 40,000 prisoners are still sitting behind bars right now for cannabis crimes. The fight for legalization is not over, and so I again just want to thank you for supporting my page. If you find my videos helpful, if you believe in this opportunity, but also if you're coming back because you want to learn the truth about this plant, why it's actually been illegal for so long, and why we're almost at a tipping point to actually hopefully descheduling it, or at least getting some of the rights back to American citizens, which will then lead to the rights back for everyone around the globe to get access to this plant for medicinal purposes and just for the right to experiment with your own consciousness. I leave you with this reminder, but that is it for today's episode, folks. And I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.